Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got a little bit of a breaking story, actually, because it seems like the Battlefield franchise is getting restructured by EA. Now, there's obviously the question, is this it? I mean, it very literally is getting restructured in the wake of 2042 having a big explode. Now, there's of course also the idea that a whole bunch of this could have been planned already. So I think it's probably a little bit of a mix of both. I think the initial struggles of 2042 have probably prompted them to be a bit more public and a bit more aggressive with these things, because they basically know that if they want a modern-ish military shooter, then it has to be Battlefield, because Medal of Honor is a little bit dead after they tried to do Warfighters. And this is fairly large because the general manager of DICE is gone. So let's just jump into it. There's quite a lot here. Of course, it's a EA story, so Vince Zampella, the company fixer, basically is going to come in too. So let's get into this. DICE GM Oscar Gabrielson is leaving the company to pursue a new endeavor outside of EA. So the way that this very obviously looks is, in the wake of Battlefield 2042 being one of the most downvoted games on Steam, the general manager of the lead development studio is leaving. That certainly is dramatic. Now, of course, it could very much just be the case that this was a planned departure after the game shipped. So, don't really know exactly what it is, but we all know that it looks a certain way. And when people think about Vince Zampella, they usually think good things. Because Vince, of course, instrumental to Call of Duty, instrumental to Respawn Entertainment, and generally speaking has been doing a lot of great things at EA. While a lot of other EA projects were floundering, the things that Zampella was tied to, they were doing good. So this shakeup includes Respawn's Vince Zampella taking over a bigger role as the overall boss of the Battlefield franchise. Now, we had heard actually of him doing a little bit of work at DICE LA. Yeah, which I believe was then... Was it the one that was renamed to Ripple Effect? It kind of slips me, but...
I think so, because that's not... Yeah, because Marcus Leto's building a new place in Seattle, and that's not Ripple Effect. So I think DICE LA is Ripple Effect, yeah.
That's the next thing then. Halo designer Marcus Leto is building a new development team in Seattle, focused on injecting more storytelling into the Battlefield universe. Now, that's quite interesting to me. I think we can all agree that DICE doing a big campaign in a Battlefield game is a waste of time. Battlefield, to me, has always been one of those 1,000-hour games that's very focused on the multiplayer. So it's always felt like a waste of time. I mean, Bad Company 2's narrative was a little bit better, but still, for me, I'm there for the multiplayer. But a new studio going to do that, well, that could actually be quite interesting. It's funny, I remember, hopefully this isn't rose-tinted goggles, but I remember it was Battlefield Modern Conflict. It was the PS2 and original Xbox, basically skew of Battlefield 2. And I'm not going to say its single-player was great or anything like that, but it at least did embrace being a Battlefield game, where you had these big missions where you could hop between different soldiers. You kind of you see a helicopter, you can zoop into the guy who's doing the thing. And I always thought that was quite a neat thing in that game that was evocative of the Battlefield feel. Yeah. So I wonder what they could do.
Well, here's a comparison to bring up. So Vince Zampella, Respawn, Titanfall. Titanfall 1 was extremely well received because it was sick, basically. It's an incredible game. But now it's a bit floundered. But what really kicked that series off substantially more was Titanfall 2. Because it actually had a campaign, unlike the original. The original technically did, but it was just narrated, multiplayer matches. But then, if you look now, a lot of what people remember about Titanfall 2 is they got that campaign that was really well executed, taught them how to play. It was full of all of the great gameplay mechanics, and that led people into the multiplayer where they could expand on those. I feel like that's something that now, if you're looking to build a big expanded franchise, you kind of need that stuff to get the huge numbers in.
You want an emotional core to it.
Yeah.
Something that even Riot are doing.
Yep.
They're adding an emotional core to the gameplay and characters that you've enjoyed for such a long time. So there's that with Marcus Leto's studio. There's also then Ripple Effect, the developer of Portal Mode, who are developing a new Battlefield experience in the 2042 universe. Could be neat. I mean, by all accounts, Portal Mode is a genuine, humongous win that generally people are very happy about. So it's an interesting situation that we're hearing about this restructuring and a whole bunch of work and changes in the wake of 2042 having its issues. And this is the sort of thing, I mean, you know, EA announces a restructuring of its development teams as it looks to grow Battlefield. EA announces. I mean, that's fairly, that's them trying to make noise about it, right? That's them probably trying to give a little bit more confidence in the Battlefield franchise. Because, I mean, look, EA, they have sports. But on the RPGs, they've obviously struggled with BioWare. On the shooters, they have recently struggled. Like, these are not good situations. Obviously, outside of Apex, which has been doing incredibly. I suppose it's that thing. Vince Zampella. You've got sports games and Vince Zampella. What about everything else? Not to hero worship the guy, obviously. That's the work of people who, you know, work underneath his leadership. So, in the immediate future, EA have told GameSpot that DICE, Ripple Effect, and Lido's new Seattle-based studio are working together to expand and improve Battlefield 2042. So they are wanting to give players that confidence that it's being looked at. The other Battlefield games and experiences in the works are meant to serve as extensions to a degree of a new Battlefield universe, the BCU, that EA is trying to create, and there are no specifics as to what that is going to be or any release plans. Now, as for Lido, well, Ripple Effect are, his studio is going to be collaborating with DICE and Ripple Effect with the aim of expanding the narrative storytelling and character development opportunities of the Battlefield series. I generally say, yeah, fair play, actually. I don't think DICE have done a marvelous job. They've had one or two little highlights in the recent campaigns. I will give them that, one or two stronger emotional moments. But I think they should focus on the multiplayer. So I mean, that does seem fair enough to me. So it's interesting in terms of this new team. I mean, one of the things about Lido that I think almost everybody forgot is the video game Disintegration. And the company that made it, V1, which has since disintegrated because, I mean, to say that the game's player base disintegrated would kind of imply that it had a decently sized one at the start. It was just one of those games that, you know, it didn't find its audience, it fell over. So that's a bit rough. Now, also there's Brian Beatty, who is a longtime Call of Duty veteran that EA hired earlier this year to grow the Battlefield series as a shepherd of long-term strategy and business decisions. So you can basically see here that, you know, this variety of experiences, the new studio, all this stuff, is EA trying to do a lot more with Battlefield. I think they've basically realized that, well, in the past, what happened, right? They tried to get more yearly FPSs. And what this basically resulted in is, you know, you had Battlefield 4, you had Medal of Honor, Warfighter, you had Titanfall 2, you had, oh dear, the other one, Battlefield Hardline, that DICE LA led. And basically they had some of their games, like with Titanfall 2, they were competing with each other, which Battlefield 1, I think, was the one that kind of maybe shot Titanfall 2 in the back of the head. Yeah, very silly release timing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the release timing was Battlefield 1, then Titanfall 2 like a week later, and then Call of Duty was a week after that. So they just put Titanfall 2 in the death zone. Very silly. They
did. And then, of course, before that, you've got the whole big mess with Warfighter. You've got Battlefield Hardline. Basically, like, just let's turn LA into a literal war zone and theme it after the place, which was, it was just weird for a Battlefield setting. And actually, there's a few things in that game I did like, but it was weird for a Battlefield setting. So previously, when they tried to really pump all of this stuff up, they kind of messed it up. Then Battlefield 1 is a humongous success, gets a whole bunch of DLC, a whole bunch of support, and you have this situation where Battlefield 1 is doing really well for its players, which generally people who are really driven to that theme, and also people who like the more kind of, I guess, simple gameplay of Battlefield 1. And then you've got the Battlefield 4 people, who are all doing, you know, kickflips off the blades of a helicopter inverted with a rocket launcher. All the crazy shit in BF4. So you've got the Battlefield player base feeling pretty good. Then Battlefield 5 managed to mess that up. Doesn't get the support it needs. Then, and of course, it has, you know, Firewall, Battle Royale field. It has the Battle Royale that nobody really wanted. That, of course, was okay. Actually, it was pretty decent, but nobody wanted it, so it just fell over. So they wasted a whole bunch of dev time and resources on that. and I guess waste some of Criterion's time, which is always unfortunate because we all know what we'd rather we would have Criterion be doing. Yep. And then Battlefield 5 comes around, and they have a whole bunch of wacky design changes that seem to not really appeal to the Battlefield 5 people who will have liked some of the bits of Battlefield 5 that I loved, making the little reinforcements in the bases. I loved the gunplay. I loved the movement mechanics. Those things basically all are regression to Battlefield 5. So they managed to not make the Battlefield 4, 1, or 5 real. Basically, they had some steps forward for that game in its own right, obviously, but I think for loads of people, counteracted by the steps back from the previous games that they liked. So just on their own taking the lead, and with a bit of Dice LA, they've consistently bungled aspects of Battlefield.
Yeah, it's like we were discussing the last time we talked about Battlefield. They basically have all these different audiences, and they cannot figure out how to bring them together because they are kind of not like purely diametrically opposed, but they're very different in what kind of games they want and what kind of mechanics they want, which means that you can see the potential for a Battlefield universe to work, but only if they're able to cater to all of these individual player bases well enough. That's going to be difficult to do, and from what I understand, the Battlefield would require basically 3 different Battlefield games every 2 years. And they all have 3 different completely lanes of gameplay style.
Yeah, I think it's very possible to get something good there. I think you just need to take all of the movement mechanics from Battlefield 5. You just need to take basically the core gameplay mechanics, the way a gun feels, have those be what they are for the franchise, in the same way that obviously there are little differences between the games, but COD shooting is COD shooting. We all know what it is. They need to solidify that core feature set and then work out from that very solid foundation that they basically don't needlessly iterate on where they go in terms of unique features that could be a draw to players. If they do that well, it could be fine. And maybe they are going to do that, because if I go back to the article here, so this is from Beatty. Or maybe it's Beat, who knows, whatever. While he and his team in Seattle are just getting started on building the Battlefield world of tomorrow. So world, right? So they're working out where the Battlefield universe is kind of going. Their work will shape later seasons for BF 2042 and beyond. The new studio will act as a driver for a narrative in tight collaboration with DICE and Ripple Effect Studios to build great player experiences in the Battlefield universe. Hopefully they can go away from the really stupid no-pat lore that they have, the non-patriots or whatever, in 2042, because I think it's really a bit lame. I don't know anybody who's like, hell yeah, brother, let's roll out with our fellow no-pats. Yeah. It's a very strange player fantasy. I don't understand why they thought it would be a good idea.
Our identity is we have no identity. It's kind of interesting. I just generally don't trust. Based on what I've seen in Battlefield so far, I don't think there's much trust in them building a narrative kind of overall, like a narrative-heavy universe. I mean, I think, obviously it's sort of worked a little bit with Call of Duty, where they've got their Black Ops stuff, they've got their Modern Warfare stories, and they're kind of, they're thematically close enough and similar, and they work. They're maybe not as well formed as a universe with characters in the same way that you would want out of a big IP universe. But I feel like doing that in Battlefield is going to be very, very, very difficult, because you can't just copy-paste what Call of Duty's doing. You can't do that, even though they've got the man from Call of Duty to do that. They have to have something that will feel right for Battlefield players. And I don't know if there's any narrative universe construction that'll work for that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm thinking inside the box.
I think it's actually very, very doable. So the no-pat thing's a big wash, I think. The specialist is a big wash. And for me, it's even... I want to be me, soldier, engineer. I don't want to be, old Jim Bob, the specialist with a power, or, oh, look, I'm going to play as Jim Bob, Anna, or Brian. I'm like, what the fuck are these? Are you telling me that me and fucking 35 other Brians are going to be taking to the battlefield? It's just fucking stupid. Like, from a core I can maybe understand some of their gameplay things, but I think just from a core fantasy, player positioning, marketing, all that stuff, I think the specialization, the way that they've done it with this, like, almost trying to make them like own little, individual hero characters, it is one of the most bafflingly stupid design decisions I've seen. Even just keep all the mechanics and change the theme and it will work better. But with how they've done that, I think there's a degree of not understanding the player fantasy of the Battlefield franchise that they very much fell into. And I can barely fathom how DICE would manage to not understand the core player fantasy of their own game. But I really think they missed it.
Well, I imagine some of that is because they're trying to work on what they actually, you know, what works in the industry so far. Because everyone else has moved to hero shooters kind of stuff, and that's worked for, well, there's big survivorship bias because there's plenty of dead games that tried that, but there are games that have tried that and it's worked. It's even worked fairly well for the monetization angle of Call of Duty for them. Obviously, you look at Overwatch, you're like, oh, well, that was the hero shooter.
In Call of Duty, that's because, oh, I can play as Frank Woods. Oh, I can play as Mason.
Yeah.
Characters that the people will know instead of, oh, you've created a, you know, an angry German that I can buy for a bunch of extra money that's going to cause a whole bunch of headlines, if you remember that whole controversy that happened with Battlefield 5. You know, I'll just create these random characters for us to buy. It's like, that's not really how it works.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they're going to try to move into a narrative-focused thing to try to set that up so it's possible. But I just feel like they're going to... There's too much potential for them to square peg round hole with what works currently in the industry, as opposed to properly take a step back and go, okay, well, how is the Battlefield player fantasy of just being a soldier going to work in the types of narratives that we know we can tell?
Yeah.
Or the types of narratives that work. Because if you think about how it'll actually go, it has to be very out there. It has to be very different to how traditional games narratives are generally handled, you know, with characterization and stuff like that. If you want to go for the actual, hey, you're just a soldier route, because you can start off just a soldier and then be characterized, but how do you not characterize a protagonist in that kind of way? So you ultimately have that problem. It almost feels similar to the kind of MMO problem, where you're like, well, how do you give a character that can be anything an actual personality for a narrative?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's stuff that is going to be too difficult for them to actually deal with properly, and that's why they've constantly went this route, I think, is to do what is possible as opposed to what's difficult.
Just give us classes and give me a bunch of different fucking helmets and different, you know, maybe face paints. Give me armor dyes, whatever. I know how people are, you know, is he just going to go for like the perfect one for the map they're playing on or whatever, but just, I don't know, man. You don't need to make it pseudo hero shooter. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's fair from a player fantasy and game mechanic perspective. But if you think about that from the angle of, we're trying to build the Battlefield universe, we're trying to construct this big Battlefield narrative, can we sell, you know, when's the Battlefield movie coming out? When can we sell the Battlefield action figures? Not that I'm sure people would buy those, but, you know, when can we sell the Battlefield Funko Pops as a deluxe edition? You kind of, they'll suffer with that from that. So I think that's kind of the problem they're probably butting into internally, and likely why they've had to, you know, there's change happening to make this possible as an actual direction they're moving in. Certainly has me very much scratching my head. You're like, what do you mean a Battlefield universe? Can you not just make a Battlefield game that people like for a change? Then you're sort of done. But
I think that's when it comes into overarching company goals versus very much, I'm a player, I want to download a product, go in it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Where if a bunch of concessions are made for, like, you know, overall kind of business goals and kind of where the big ship is being steered, sometimes that can feel confusing when, as a player, you only get the product. But what if that product is actually part of a wider overall tapestry of content, but you don't actually know that any of that exists because it hasn't been announced yet? So the thing that you've got doesn't feel good. I suppose that's maybe some of the issues they're running into. As we continue with this, you know, we've got the usual Laura Mealy being like, Vince Zampella is great! We love Vince! He saved us! But, you know, the usual talking up Vince, which, in fairness, the man does seem to deserve. So, Zampella said that EA plans to grow significantly in terms of the number of developers working on Battlefield across the company, and he called on developers to have a look at their open positions. Now, he would not comment on specifics as it relates to new types of Battlefield games that EA might make in the future, or the cadence, but he did tease the universe is rich with opportunity from a storytelling perspective as a universe where our teams can create innovative gameplay experiences. Truly, anything is possible. And when you think of, you know, war and narrative, yes, he is right. We just need to see what they actually do. Now, another interesting thing, Andrew Wilson did say the company may eventually develop a free-to-play Battlefield game. Zampella stopped short of confirming this. He said the company is exploring every possibility as it looks to grow Battlefield to help reach its full potential. It's pretty simple. If you had have made Zone of whatever, Firestorm, that was it. Yes. If Firestorm had been free-to-play and supported, maybe you would have had that already. That's what we all said at the time. You know, maybe if Hazard Zone, your Tarkov thing, maybe if that had have been spun out free-to-play, then it could have been something. And maybe something like that is going to be part of their longer-term future. So, according to Beatty, EA has devised a long-term plan to support Battlefield going forward, but the first job is to support 2042 and expand its live service offering, which is obviously hardly a surprise, and it certainly needs the help. Now, going back to DICE, the situation, yes, Oscar Gabrielson is going. He did basically, issue a statement of how it was a very, hard decision to make and all of that. It's being framed more as his personal decision, actually. And then we've got Rebecca coming in, who is the former studio director of Ubisoft Annecy. And, she's taking over as general manager of DICE taking forward. And Gabrielson is leaving to start a new adventure, but we don't know what that is yet. And as for 2042, Laura Mealy said that it's actually trending in the right direction since launch. It was a 22 in Steam. Now it's a 35. That much is literally true. And of course, as we've talked about before, that's not people saying it's a 2 out of 10. That is people saying, on average, for what all of we want from a Battlefield game, it is below our expectations. That's what a Steam review really ends up being. So it's moving in the right direction. She said that people have responded positively to the changes they've made thus far, though there remains plenty of negativity online. Basically, they're just going to need a massive amount of fixes. And look at this. The newest update, which is the biggest one to date, has more than 150 fixes and went live today, December 2nd. Their definition of shippable must be too lax. The sheer... Because you imagine if they delayed Battlefield 2042 until Q1 of next year or something. And I know that would suck, more delays, yes. But imagine if they delayed it and it came out and, it was an 80. And it sold pretty well, people were happy, and then they announced all of this. And they would be able to say, okay, hey, well, we listened to you, we went a bit back to Battlefield 4, let's not talk about specialists, etc., etc., etc. But everyone's happy. By the way, we're making big plans, big changes. It's all going to be... That would have been a way better story instead of this, where it just feels like they pumped it out to get it, just a product in the quarter. And now this, instead of being like, hey, community who's supported us well with our new game, look how great everything's going to be for you in the future, it's now, really, we're sticking with it, honest.
The people who are making the decisions around release dates really badly need to wise up, I think, more than anything else, because obviously, it was going to be out earlier. Just so, hey, here, it's out, it's November, we got the quarter, we got all the holiday sales. But it's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's like, dude, there could have been a universe where, so many games get delayed another 6 to 9 months, and we have a Cyberpunk 2077 that's a total banger at launch, and a Battlefield 2042 that's a banger at launch. Players and devs would be happy. The devs will have known of all of these, issues.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are told to mark them as shippable. Yeah, and they don't have any agency in this.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about Gabrielson. I imagine Gabrielson is like, I don't know how long they've been GM, probably a decent while, but likely just looked at, what was said to investors at the start of the year of, oh yeah, Battlefield's ahead of schedule, which means that they were really, let's go, we'll get this on, we'll rock it, this will be the definitive Battlefield experience. Something clearly happened during development, and now they're like, well, has to go out, because we have to hit the dates for investors before investors start to be concerned, or we have to hit the dates that marketing is lined up and put a lot of effort into. We're like, no, you couldn't just release it in competition with Halo, because you'd likely lose out a lot of sales there. But why not just delay it? It's that long-term thing where they just keep putting, they keep shooting themselves in the feet instead of just going, well, can we not just wait to fire this until our feet's out of the way?
It is one of the things that just makes me infinitely tired of this industry.
Big time.
And I think that the business people... I don't say toxicity. well, right, there's a lot of just negativity and stuff that's flung around everywhere in the internet these days, and I think we can all understand why. Because people have repeatedly been excited for a thing they genuinely care about, and then it gets released in a half-baked, busted state. And that's just not fair, and it keeps on happening, and the big companies clearly barely give a fuck, because they keep on doing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if someone's going to have a wee melty online, it's like, I feel like, well, that's maybe, you know, maybe you're a bit too strong there. But at a very fundamental level, I can understand why people are just so pissed off. Because whenever, you know, half the time, like, with other things, like, you know, TV and movies and stuff, it's like, at least when you hit the go button to start it, it could be a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect analogy, because there's production hell in, you know, over there as well. Like, your core usability, it's like, do I like the thing or do I not like the thing? The actual usability of the thing is there, because it's just sitting there watching some passive media. It's like, you don't have all of the bullshit of, oh, is it going to run on my machine? I mean, even if you're on, like, I think it's the Xboxes are struggling with Battlefield 2042 a little bit. You know, is it going to run on my machine? Is the frame rate going to dip? Is the frame timings going to be good? You know, is the mouse bloom, or, you know, the bloom and the guns, have they messed that up? The hit detection, have they messed that up? It's like, it just adds so many little layers of frustration to the gaming experience, and that's such a humongous loss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good analogy for TV, because I was thinking of the Starbucks cup in the Game of Thrones shot, and I think like that's one of the things where that was clearly, you know, completely missed, but they don't consider that shippable. Like, if a boom mic falls in the middle of actors as they're acting, they don't go, I guess we'll just continue talking and this will be the cut. We only have time for one take. To go, all right, execute that mic operator, get a new one in, and then we'll retake the scene. But it's just brutal. Like, I mean, I think the closest I can think in terms of an experience that watching TV is like, when it comes to the comparison to playing games, especially on PC, especially from people like DICE, it's like Firefly, where they're like, yeah, we just released this on the wrong order. Whoops. What are we going to do about it? Sorry. Fuck you.
Yeah.
It's so brutal that we put up with it, to be honest. I mean, well, honestly, I don't pre-order anything. I might be busted anymore. I'm just old and jaded, like.
I'm going to fly in with a little bit of drama, Matt, just to finish us off. Here is Battle Santa.
Oh, Battle Santa.
Battle Santa. Santa Field. Here he is. And what's really funny is, according to Tom Henderson, a leaky fella indeed, he said, fun fact, these skins were in the March 2021 QA feedback sessions in which everyone voted them down. Good to know those sessions were pointless.
Yeah.
So there you go. Purchase yourself a Battle Santa, everyone.
Yep. I mean, I think that's the point when, like, we talk about how DICE might not be able of, like, keeping the player fantasy on the go. So how much of it is DICE decision making? How much of it is old people at EA overruling them with marketing decisions? Because, I mean, obviously they've been trying to make changes. They've been very positive and open about trying to make those changes. But if there are people who are echoes of Patrick Soderlund going, it's like Iron Man, that's cool. Like, oh, Santa, then it'll be out at Christmas. Everyone will love to play Santa because it's Santa. And wouldn't it be cool? You go around shooting people as Santa. Wouldn't that be epic? And I imagine that's conversations literally overheard in the EA office. And anyone who says anything like that should be immediately removed from any position involving anything creative. But they're likely just business people going, yeah, people like it.
And like, while it may not be the most fair comparisons, it's like, there's just stuff like that. People being like, we wanted this cool military man. Instead, we have Santa. Where, you know, you can do what you want with your skins, but it's just a thing of like, yeah, you misjudged, now the community are against you. So it's all fairly interesting, to say the least. I hope it gets fixed up, because I've been playing Battlefield games really for as long as I've been PC gaming, and I've always been sort of PC gaming first, so I really wanted to have it fixed. But anyway, look, that's it from us. We'll see what goes on. We'll see what goes on. That's it. All right. Farewell.